talk about our CEO and the KPIs, etc., etc. We look forward to having that discussion also. And I think we've got a couple of other guests as well in relation to a planning matter later. But anyway, welcome, and welcome to our staff members that are here also. I'll begin by acknowledging the Ngadjuri, the Kaurna people, and as the traditional custodians of the land and waters of the Light Regional Council area. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. Moving on to our attendance tonight, do we have any apologies? No apologies, there are no leave of absence. We'll move on to section 3, which is of the agenda, is the confirmation of the minutes, council minutes, and we have a recommendation to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 23rd of May. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Fabio, would someone like to second that motion? Councillor Allison, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you. We also have a recommendation to confirm the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 6th of June 23. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Ellison, someone like to second that meeting? Councillor Fabio, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. That was déjà vu. We'll move on now to about section 4.1, which is communications, and specifically mayor and elected members' communications. Councillors, do you have any updates or any reports that you'd like to? Councillor Michael, and welcome back home.
Thank you, Bill.
22 flights later.
Yes, I did get here eventually. Thank you. Just advising, I've had correspondence with Tony Piccolo's office about a meeting on the 6th of July. So I'll meet with him then.
Thank you, Councillor Michael. Any further updates, Councillor Simon?
Yes, I attended the Barossa Region's Residents Association community meeting. What was it, last Thursday, I think? And it was about the it was some excellent speakers. It was about the Character Preservation Act, and I mean there's an agenda item that we're going to have tonight to talk about it. But that was an excellent meeting. There was about 3 elected members from Barossa Council, and I was the only representative from Light Council. Probably about 50 residents, and it was an excellent occasion to just hear the concerns and the information about that. So it was a good thing.
Yeah, as you rightly say, we have a fairly forensic report tonight on that very matter, and Craig's done some wonderful work in that area. But in due respect, Barossa Council are driving this particular matter. But thank you, Councillor Simon. We have no petitions. But we do have a report from the mayor. I had the good fortune to attend at the invitation of Kiwanis this year. What they term the Sir Condor Lauki oration was held in the Vineyard Hotel. This particular event's been going for some 40 odd years, and I remember being an Apexian 1,000 years ago when we first created this event. It was to celebrate Sir Condor Lauki, who was a very famous resident, of course, of Greenock in the old days, and was the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Canberra for many years. And it was in his honour that this particular occasion was presented. The guest speaker on this occasion was Dr. James Mukey, AM. He's a Lieutenant Governor of South Australia. He's an ornithologist and an amazing man, and Australian of the Year in 2020 and South Australian of the Year in 2020. So his credentials are first class. His presentation, I must say, I've seen many presentations in my time, but this would have to be one of the better ones. And it's certainly done Sir Condor Lauki, his memory, proud, and we wish this Dr. James Mukey well in his future endeavours, which is to try and correct the eyesight of diabetes sufferers throughout the world. It's a major task that he's put in front of him, but looking at his track record and listening to what he had to say, he's just the man for the job. And also, we had a Legatus meeting on Friday, a sustainability forum, which was held at the Farm Centre in Freeling. It was quite well attended. And I must thank Simon Sheriff, who was one of the speakers at this particular forum. He did an absolutely incredible presentation. It was first class, and well done to Simon Sheriff. And it gave me 5 or 10 minutes to be able to boast about our region to all the people that were there. And it's always a nice feeling, particularly when you're in a building like the Farm Centre, which was really created by the community and pretty much paid for by the community too, or is being paid for by. And, that was a great occasion and a great celebration at the end, showing people around and talking about our region in general. Also on the 12th of June, Marilyn and myself had the unfortunate good fortune to attend the celebration of Their Majesty's coronation at Government House with the Governor and many distinguished guests. It was a wonderful occasion, and I felt very honoured and proud to be there. And I also met up with my dear friend Hugh Von Lay, our previous Governor, who I'd built up quite a strong relationship with. It was lovely to see him and his wife again. Regrettably, on the way, Marilyn broke her hip when she had a little tumble. It wasn't hip and shoulder from me, by the way. She actually did trip, and she's still not as well as she can be. She's not running the mile in two, put it that way, but she's getting better. We've had some communications with the media. Been a bit quiet. We had I thought a good report in the Bunyip in relation to the state budget, being asked the question of what we wanted to see in the state budget from the government. I'd try to keep it as positive as possible and talking about how we want to work with the state government. We want them to target and look at the projects that we're putting forward and supporting them. So rather than just looking for a handout, we look for a hand up in some of the things that we're doing, including the copper mine site too, and looking at the licenses that are required there and maybe a hurry on. And the leader, who will be here again this week talking about something different, but they had a headline in relation to our proposed rate increase and called it a modest increase and didn't say much at all, which was a little disappointing because I think our council has worked extremely hard on our budget, and to keep the numbers down in the manner that has been presented and will be presented tonight has been an absolute credit to everyone concerned, and I think it deserved a little bit more than a glancing blow. But that's about my presentation from what I've been doing in the last little bit. Tonight we have a presentation to be considered in confidence. We're suggesting we will need to bring item 16.1 from the confidential agenda to bring that forward to discuss that item as our first item on the agenda tonight. Do I have a mover that someone would move that we go into confidence to discuss this particular matter? Councillor Allison, would someone like to second that? Excuse me. Councillor Lynn? Well, this lady is from MacArthur's in Adelaide and would have to sit through the whole meeting. It's been a fairly common practice that we've done that. But Councillor?
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
So we're going into confidence for that item.
Yes.
Do we? So the question: do we really need to go into confidence for that item?
Do we need to
go into confidence for that item?
16.1, Councillor Simon.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
If you'd like to read that.
But the way I read is it is a recommendation to go into confidence. But I'm sort of thinking, is it necessary to go into confidence? Do we need? I mean, I'm sort of speaking against the recommendation if that's
okay.
What I'm trying to do.
Well, do we have a mover?
Instead of speaking against it, I would just like to ask why we need to go into confidence.
Could you just be quiet for a moment, councillor Simon? Yeah. It's moved and seconded to be brought forward. That's all at this stage. It's not on the table. So we don't want to talk about the item itself. We're just talking about going into confidence to discuss the item. And that's what we've moved and what we've seconded. And you've made a comment that you don't agree with that.
Yes, I just want to question why we need to go.
Well, I'm
into
going to
confidence,
put the
how
motion
section.
first. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Excuse me? It was carried. I'll put the motion again. All those in favour?
Just that there seems to be confusion. We just move, this motion is just to move this forward.
To
The
bring it-
discussion about this.
That's right. So we're all comfortable that we've brought this motion forward to discuss this matter in confidence now. Okay, so the second motion is, pardon me, I've been pulled up and Rich is correct. The second recommendation is that under the provisions of the Act, which is 16.1, that we go into confidence to discuss this matter, and 16.2. Would someone like to move that way?
The resolution.
Yes, there's the resolution there. Would someone like to move that way? This is confusing. I thought we'd already done that. Right. So we've brought the motion forward to be able to present the motion. Is that correct? So that's the motion we're looking at now, councillors. 16.1. Do I have a mover? No mover?
Move that, Mayor,
Thanks, councillor.
view, but I would appreciate a little bit of explanation as to why this is in confidence. I'm not 100% certain as to why that is the case, but if we move it and second it, well, then we can discuss that.
Certainly. And if we can't,
Thank you. Through the chair, Mayor Bill.
thank you, June.
Yes, it was decided that we would put it up as a confidential item because the presentation could potentially lead to discussions about the actual KPIs, which form part of the terms and conditions of employment that are confidential by nature through that discussion. So that's why we put it up as a confidential item rather than open to the public. Conversation may lead to more detailed discussion rather than just a presentation.
Thank you, June. Councillor Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bill. Thanks, June. So my question is, though, if we're to discuss key performance indicators, presumably we're not discussing sensitive financial information. It's really just how do we measure the performance of that position? Is that what follows?
I would understand. Sorry, June.
Through the chair, that's correct. It's not tied to any financial discussions.
Yeah. So what would be sensitive about that from an individual's perspective?
Through the chair, I think it's been a normal practice in the past.
So I guess because it's been a normal practice, it doesn't make it right. So I'll ask a question. I'll ask Councillor Simon.
If I can make a comment, I've found a ombudsman report from about 2 years ago, And then they're talking about this sort of thing, and it clearly in there says, I advise councils that I could see no good reason to exclude the public from discussions and consequently from access to documentation which covered inter alia the key performance indicators established for the CEO position. So the Ombudsman is quite clear that he can see no good reason to exclude the public from discussions. So, which is what we're doing here. So I don't really see why we need to go into confidence.
Okay. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'm going to put this recommendation and have it.
Hasn't been
dealt
seconded
with.
yet, I don't think, Mayor Bill.
Excuse me? Oh, we've got a mover for the recommendation. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation? Because if I don't, the motion lapses and we go back into our normal meeting procedure. Comfortable with that, councillors?
Mr Mayor, haven't we moved to bring the item forward anyway? So the presentation will happen now, but we just won't be in confidence.
That's right. Just won't be in confidence. Happy with that, councillors? Councillor Peter? All right. Okay, you comfortable with that? Rebecca? Okay, you comfortable with that, Richard? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Is this working? Great. Good evening, everyone. I'll wait till we get the presentation up on the screen so I can talk to you about the presentation. So thank you for inviting me here this evening. I'm here to talk about setting key performance indicators, KPIs for the CEO. Part of the performance review process is to set these KPIs, and I'm about to talk about how we set them and the conditions around us setting KPIs and what your responsibility is and what the CEO's responsibility is. So just as some background, key performance indicators KPIs stand for key performance indicators, and they're quantifiable measures of performance over a time for a specific objective. Now, KPIs provide targets for teams, employees, and that's what they need to aim for. They need to be milestones that gauge progress. And generally in a CEO's performance review, we look at two parts. We look at BAU, which is the CEO's position description, what the CEO should be doing every day. We're talking financial management, asset management, those sort of things. These are separate. This is another measure. This is what you're saying to the CEO are the key priorities for the next 12 months. The role of the elected body is to have that two-way discussion. It does need to be a two-way discussion with the CEO. It can't be just, these are your KPIs. It has to be a discussion because we need to make sure that they're going to be able to be achievable. These also need to be strategic. They're not operational tasks. It's not a list of tasks that CEO needs to do. That's not what a KPI is. A KPI is your strategic objective. How the CEO actually delivers that with the resources and the operational resources, time, and so forth is up to the CEO and the administration. So let me move on and talk about SMART objectives. I'm sorry, this is a bit cliche. And for those of you that already know about this, I apologize for going over it again. But I do think it's really important to talk about SMART objectives. They need to be specific. So you need to talk about what exactly needs to be accomplished. What is that end outcome? They need to be measurable, quantified and easily assessed. They can't be like, oh, how do we look at this? How are we going to assess whether the CEO's yes done it or no has not done that? They need to be achievable. I use a very coy example of once I did sit in a council meeting where the elected body wanted the mayor the CEO to build a bridge. It wasn't in their strategic plan and there was no budget. That's not achievable. Can't happen because it's not there unless you changed all those other things. So that's what I mean by achievable. Is it in the CEO's control? Is it something that you're reliant on somebody else to provide funding, somebody else to be able to deliver, a different state, federal, perhaps neighbouring councils? You've got to be cognizant that it actually has to be in the CEO's control to be able to deliver. They also need to be realistic. And that's what I meant by ensuring any kind of financial liability attached to that KPI is in your budget at the moment. Otherwise, it's not achievable. Time bound as well. And when talking about time bound, it doesn't have to be a whole complete project. It can be a milestone that they need to reach. It can be a draft. It could be advanced towards. As long as it's measurable, you don't have to have something complete, because you may have something that's going to take multiple years to be able to achieve. So this will provide the CEO and council's administration with the focus and direction, because what happens is, as well you all know, KPIs cascade down through the organisation. So what you set as the KPIs for the CEO will then get interpreted into KPIs and down through the organisation, right the way down, so that everybody knows what you have set as the direction and what needs to be achieved. And what we found in all organisations is define directions and get better outcomes for council. So you're saying, okay, these are the key priorities that we want you to deliver in the next 12 months. Everything else, there will be things coming up, but these are the priorities which we want you to report against, A, and B, be able to deliver. They can change. I'm not saying that they are set in stone. Through discussion, through meetings, they can change, because of course we saw a lot of that unfortunately happen with things such as COVID, floods, all these other things that have happened over the time. KPIs have changed for CEOs. I will say less is more as well. Strategic, concise, explainable, big ticket priorities for you in the next 12 months, 3 to 7 maximum. Now, if there is more, it'll be a talking piece and ensuring that with conversations with the CEO, they are going to be achievable to achieve that many KPIs, depending on the size of those KPIs. So that's my short presentation, to the point, letting you know how this happens. Now, as a bit of background for you, my name is Rebecca Hunt. I'm from Macarthur. I've been doing what I'm doing right now for the last 10 years in local government. I consult to pretty much 68 of the 68 councils, and I do KPI performance reviews for well over 2/3 of those councils. So I'm quite experienced in doing this. I'm here to help you set some strategic KPIs that set the CEO and you as a council up for success. We need to make sure we wordsmith them. It needs to be a two-way discussion with the CEO. And that's really basically the long and short of what the discussion is going to be about.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was,
No problem.
That's excellent, Doc. I might propose that we suspend standing orders or procedures to allow just for an informal discussion while we've got Rebecca here. So if there's any questions that council members may have, they can direct them straight to Rebecca, if you're handy.
No problem.
Thank you.
Gladly.
Councillor Dean?
Just a quick one, I assume that
I
the
need a
12
show
month,
of hands to suspend standing orders. Do I have a show of hands that we suspend standing orders? Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
just a quick one. I assume the 12-month period is from the moment the KPIs are actually approved by council. It's not from the start of the council year or the calendar year.
No, I mean, ideally, because of how performance reviews generally go in the term of 12 months from commencement date, it would be ideal to set them as soon as possible of that 12-month period. But understandably, you've got to set the budget. A lot of this comes out of the budget and some of those strategic directions. So yes, it will be from that time. It may be that you say, okay, we're now down to 11 months because we've gone a month over, and that can be taken in consideration when looking at those priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any further questions? Councillor Michael?
Just to clarify, Mayor Bill, so is the intention to engage in a discussion on agreeing these KPIs here now, or is that this just a presentation on not clear on what the next steps are?
Next steps. Thank you, June.
Through the chair, as Rebecca just pointed out, that Richard Dodson's contract commenced 1st of May. And in accordance with that, the KPIs, the first performance review is supposed to be undertaken after a 12-month period, meaning we've got 11 months. So one, they have to be achievable. within the 11-month timeframe that's been set. But I guess the sooner they've been set, the more time there is to demonstrate that they can be achieved. Otherwise, they'd be shorter term KPIs for the first 12-month period to enable Richard to achieve them.
June, is there a carryover from a previous CEO to get the ball rolling?
Through the chair, we engaged a different consultant to design those KPIs with council. Yeah, so I don't know if Rebecca could start the ball rolling with some standard.
Well, standard is an interesting one, because what is standard?
Business
They're
as usual.
priorities for you. The standard ones are business as usual, and they'll be part of the other side of the performance. These are about your key priorities. There are some things that are genuinely going on within councils, such as with a new election, obviously new elected council, within the first 24 months, the strategic plan has to be reviewed and so forth. So there's some councils are putting those in as a KPI to ensure that that happens in the next 12 months rather than 24 months. But really it's about those big ticket items. It's if there's some things going on internally within council that needs to be addressed, whether there was something from out of your strategic plan. They have to come out of your strategy, obviously have to be in the same direction of what you're going. And those things are obviously things you know about and what you want to prioritise, obviously in agreement with CEO. So there's not really any standard ones, but you know, around that fact that there is things like review of the strategic plan and any major key priorities, things that you want the CEO to report on regularly and say, above all else that we are doing, this is the key priorities. So the elected body is really the only people that can answer that question.
Thank you, Rebecca. Further questions, councillors? Kari, would you like to have input?
Thank you, through the chair. So just to advise of a little bit more process, we will be looking to hold a workshop with the elected body and MacArthur to go through and finalise the to work together with the KPIs, because the KPIs are with the elected body and also the CEO. So a workshop will be held for that.
Yeah, thanks, Kari. Got any time frame on that?
Within the next 3 weeks is my
Oh, wow.
understanding, and I will be onto that as soon as possible. Potentially I think our next committee meeting will be 11th of July. So I would say that we would aim for that date.
Thanks, Karen. Any questions, councillors, comments? Fabio? Councillor Fabio?
So through the chair, obviously that determines the actual KPIs as well, or during that period. Do the elected members have a say or an opinion towards the weighting of those KPIs, or are they basically a weighted average?
No, I mean, if that's something that you want to do, is to weight them, prioritise them in some way, yeah, that's definitely something we can do. From my perspective, it's assuring that we keep them as strategic as possible, so that what happens is when we get to the end of it, they've aligned to your strategic direction, your suite of strategic plans, and they're big ticket items that you say, yes, we want to do them. So hopefully there will be sort of around the same weighting, but we can prioritise and say, you know, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4. But it needs to be that two-way discussion. So in that workshop, it's about the CEO plus all of the elected body to come to the meeting with those ideas, with those topics, so that we can workshop it and decide on what those priorities will be.
Thank you.
With regard to
Councillor Dean.
the KPI, so strategic plan was one of them, completing the strategic plan. Is it appropriate in the KPI to provide a little bit of structure or detail to that? For example, groups that need to be consulted, for example? Or is it just you keep your KPI just as a ball statement and then about 10 words? Because it seems to me that you can tick off completing the strategic plan, but if it's done in a way that doesn't involve sufficient input from a sufficient number of people, or the structure of which is done is not very effective, then you can tick it off, but it's not a good strategic plan. So what I'm trying to understand is what is the balance that you have in a KPI that sort of ensures that not only is it ticked off, but it's actually an effective document.
Well, the KPI, depending on the type of KPI, can be, you know, obviously we'll wordsmith it so that it is getting the outcome that you want. Whether that's what that involves. Generally, what happens is good KPIs are that high level strategic and its outcome. So how the actual CEO and the administration deliver that for you is obviously part of the operations, which is part of what the CEO and administration does. But if there are some specific things that you want to add into those KPIs to ensure milestones, perhaps some dot points around, perhaps as you say, consultation, they definitely can be added into a KPI.
You can always ask another question. Would it be more appropriate then to focus the KPI on the outcomes, for example, a strategic plan that has the understanding and support of, and then list two?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we can workshop around the wording to do with those KPIs, definitely.
Councillor Peter.
Would we now discuss particular key performance indicators, or would the particulars be left to the forthcoming workshop?
It'd be my understanding that it would be at the workshop, Councillor Peter, but I might take some advice from Gary.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, it would be determined. You would be looking to bring your ideas, as Rebecca mentioned, to the workshop to work through those. So rather than going through the particulars here, it would be at the workshop.
So in short, now is not the time.
No.
Yeah.
Councillors, I think that's where the confusion might have been a little earlier. I understood that we may have been discussing those key performance indicators and which would need to have been in confidence. So that's a confusion earlier, and I do apologise for that.
Through the chair, if I may, just letting you know, it's probably quite a robust and could take some time to flesh really out what you want. So it's my understanding I don't have that much time today. I've not been allowed to speak for that long, but it's something that we're going to probably need quite, you know, a considerable amount of time to ensure that everybody has their say. Everybody, we workshop it, we get the right terminology so that everybody's comfortable. That could take, you know, quite a considerable amount of time to do that, and obviously to do it justice. It's a very important process. CEO is your number one, your only employee, as it were, and it's your responsibility to set those KPIs.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I sincerely thank you for your time tonight, and we look forward to working with you in developing the KPIs for our CEO. And it looks like we're sort of halfway down the track already, which is good, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest around it.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to the elected body.
Councillors, we'll now move on to our next item of business, which is adjourned business, which we have none. And then we move on to action items, which is section 8 of our council agenda. Page number 6, are there any matters on page 6 that you would like to bring forward? Not, we'll look at page 7, page 8, and page 9. Councillor Collin?
Yeah, just on page 8, I was just wondering if the Barossa Regional Event Strategy paper from, or the strategy from 2014-16 is going to be any use to us to do our own strategy.
The chair, and thanks for pointing us towards that document. We have had some discussions around, I guess, what the aim of that document was back in 2014. I understand it was mainly around Barossa Vintage Festival and looking at models that could sustain that particular, I guess, hallmark event for the region. So I think that was the predominant outcome they were looking for, but essentially the model that they came up with didn't end up eventuating for a range of reasons. But I think there's still valid information in there that we'd seek to include in the event strategy. So I don't think it'd be a cut and paste effort, but certainly aspects of it we'd seek to include.
Thanks, Corinne. Further questions, councillors? On page 8. Move to page 9. We will move to item 9, recommendations from the committees. 9.1 is the audit and, excuse me. Oh, okay. Thank you. I should have also allowed some time for the minute taker to be able to get up to date before. Apologies for that. I must have been on something tonight. I'm all over the place. I think I'm struggling a tiny bit with the new meeting procedural formats in front of me, and if I do make any mistakes tonight, please forgive me, and I'll do my homework in the future and make sure it doesn't happen again. Recommendations from our committees. First one being the Audit and Risk Committee. The recommendation is about a third of the way down page 7. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Dean. Would someone like to? Recommendation 1, that's correct, that the matter be received. Would someone like to second that?
Yes.
Councillor Collin, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried.
Mayor Bill, I wish to withdraw 7.3.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. 7.3.
Do you wish me to say why and what? Now,
Do I have a seconder to remove?
you don't need a
No, I
second.
don't need a seconder, sorry.
Mayor Bill, the number 3 appears to, in a way, be preempting the debate in 11.4, which is the one on the budget, because it says recommends the council adopts the 20 annual business plan. Well, if we pass that, we're basically saying we've adopted it.
May I suggest then that we move?
So what I'm suggesting is that we add at the start of that, notes the recommendation that it adopts. So in other words, we're noting that the audit committee thinks it's worthy to be adopted, but we're not actually adopting it at that point. We're just noting that that's what they've said, because the adoption of the annual business plan is in fact a council responsibility, and we need to debate that properly. And if we do that, it tends to confuse or inhibit that. So what I'm suggesting is that we
remove 7.3
yeah,
from this recommendation
and modify it and then vote on the modified one.
and discuss this during section 11.4.
Yeah, so if you're okay with me doing this, I move that we adopt ARC 7.3 with the addition to number 3, notes the recommendation that it adopts.
Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Lynn.
Oh, that's here, number 3, yeah. So press.
All those in favour? Well, what's it telling me to do?
Got a few too many dots in there, I think. So all you need to add is note the recommendation of the audit and risk. Note the recommendation that it. That would be consistent with the other wording, I think. So you just add the word notes the recommendation that it and leaves the rest all the same. That would actually achieve the result of us simply noting that the audit and risk committee are happy with the budget, basically, and thinks it's okay to adopt. Which is really the role of the audit and risk committee, I believe, is to do that. But the way it was worded before, if we pass it, it really is confusing. And conflicts with 11.4. That's the wording that I'm proposing. It's up there now.
Councillor Dean, are you satisfied with point 3 in their recommendation there, the wording?
Sorry,
Are you satisfied with the wording in point 3 of your of the recommendation there that you're moving? It's on the screen.
Yeah.
Behind me.
what's up there is what I'm recommending.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
happy with that?
So I'm moving that, the third 7.3 becomes what's up there now, and that we move that rather than the what was up there before. And the whole objective of withdrawing items is so that if we need to, we can change them, as well as asking questions, of course. So that's I've moved it. I haven't had a second yet, but that's we did. Do we have a second? Yes.
A second from Lynette. Councillor Peter?
We have a motion on notice 14.1 from me and a motion on notice 14.2 from councillor Zeller. And I wonder if we could include these two motions on notice in what we're discussing now.
Not appropriate.
No, I don't think I would accept that.
Just confuse the issue.
What I'm concerned about, of course, here is that this is the recommendations that came out of the Audit and Risk Committee. And I'm not sure that we can amend their recommendations. That's what's got me concerned. Councillor Michael.
Mayor Bill, if I may, so I agree with what Councillor Dean's proposing. I think the issue is that the motion as it was written was for council to adopt the recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee. One of the recommendations at 7.3 was to adopt the budget. So we want to presumably adopt everything other than 7.3, because as Councillor Peter rightly pointed out and others, 11.4 is the motion where council will deal with the budget itself.
That's right.
I think that's all we're really trying to do, isn't it?
Right.
Mayor Bill, there's no reason why we can't
I'm happy with that.
vary the recommendation. It's merely a recommendation. It's not actually, doesn't really have any weight till we pass it. And if we don't quite like the way it's written, we can change a little bit. That's quite appropriate.
I'm happy with that. So just to clarify. Okay. Don't have a choice. I'll put the motion. We've got a mover and a seconder for 7.3. It's up on the screen. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors, and sorry for that confusion. That's a new one. Now we go back to recommendation 2 at the top.
All right, so could I just comment also on that recommendation?
Could you?
I just want to make a comment on that recommendation. I think that I was at the Audit and Risk Committee as a member of the public, and I actually didn't agree with the recommendation at all. I found that where it said there was no significant change or with consultation with the public, I think that was put in a bit too early. I think that if I was on the Audit and Risk Committee, I wouldn't have voted for that recommendation to be adopted at all. I don't think it's a true representation of what happened on the meeting with a public meeting, but I'll accept it the way it is. But it's I think we've got to be very careful in what we write, because I had quite a few calls about it, and they weren't happy with the way that the public meeting had been described.
Thanks, Councillor Colin.
Mayor Bill, this opinion is that of the Audit Committee, by the way.
That's
Not
very,
necessarily the councils, it's the Audit Committees, and we're noting that it is That's why I added those words.
But the recommendation was given to him by council. So that was given to the Audit and Risk Committee, which they voted on. There was only one elected member.
Councillor Collin, we're debating now and we shouldn't.
Oh,
be.
sorry.
You know that. We shouldn't be debating. I think we're up to date. We've moved that motion. We're back to recommendation 2, which is at the top. The reports and the recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee as listed below be adopted. And we've removed section number 3. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, would someone like to second that? Councillor Annette? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we move on now to the Infrastructure and Sustainability Committee meeting and a recommendation up near the top of page 10. That's it, up the top of page 10 there. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Simon and Councillor Michael? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. I should have asked someone to speak for it. People want to speak their emotions. We move on to reports for information, councillors. Recommendation 2. This is everyone. Recommendation 2. Where? See the reports. Recommendation 2. Looking at recommendation 2 as part of those reports, councillors. Councillor Lynn, thank you. Someone like to second that? Councillor Simon. Is there any discussion, councillors, in relation to this matter? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. It's got to be tidied up. Councillors, up to 10.1, which is our reports for information. First one being the monthly financial report for May 23. And there's a recommendation at the top that the reports for information be received and the contents herein be noted by council. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Peter, someone like to second that? Councillor Beale, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. There's a comprehensive report from Nigel with a detailed update of the financial information on pages 14 through to 17, which is useful prior to the consideration of the approval of the annual business plan and budget and the long-term financial plan. Are there any further updates to this report since the agenda was published? And I'm probably looking for Dr. Nigel, if he's here, to. Oh, sorry. What do we do with that?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I think I've got my wife's glasses on tonight. 11.1, a recommendation at the top of the page that receives the report titled Policy Review, Citizenship Ceremony Policy, and point 2 adopts the 9.04 Citizenship Policy Amendment number 4. Are there any further updates to this report since the agenda item was published? No further updates. Do councillors have any questions about this report that haven't had the chance or opportunity to ask staff yet? Or would someone like to move the motion? Councillor Michael, someone like to second the motion? Or would you like to speak to your motion? Would someone like to second the motion? Councillor Bill, would you like to speak to that? Thank you. If there are no further speakers, would the mover like to exercise a right of reply? No. I'll take the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried. It seems like we're introducing bits and pieces as we go. The next report on page 21, item 11.2 is Barossa Growth and Infrastructure Investment Strategy and Barossa Character Preservation District Review. There's a recommendation on the top of page 14. That recommendation there. Are there any further updates to this report since the agenda was published? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Craig, thank you.
Thank you. Just that a listening post was held at Marananga on Saturday over the weekend that was organised by Barossa, but one of our staff attended to answer questions, listen in on responses, and Kyna Mann, who's in the gallery at the moment, was our staff member representing council. I understand it was very well attended, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks so much, Craig. The councillors have any questions in relation to this report that they haven't had the opportunity to ask anyone? Councillor Michael, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bill. Just noting that this council will be providing a financial contribution of $20,000 towards a code amendment. Are other neighbouring councils providing financial contributions, or does it only affect this council?
I'll pass to Craig, but I think it's Barossa and ourselves.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. It'll be us and the Barossa Council, and I understand they're providing a matching commitment.
Further questions, councillors? Councillor Solomon?
Through the chair, can I make some comments, or is that?
Well, excuse me. We've got a motion there. We'd like to speak to the motion.
I'd love to change the motion. Or amend and add to it. And so therefore I would like to make some comments on why I want to do this.
Can you table your alternative motion?
No, I surely can. It's quite a lengthy one, so I don't know if you happen to have it prepared already, but I don't know if I definitely want to speak about it a little bit because.
Yeah, so if someone could get that.
One thing.
Put it up on the notice there, but people can read it.
So you want me to read it out or?
Might just pause while we deal with this, councillors, for a moment. So this has been moved. So there's a motion there. And that's so, but that got, no, that didn't get moved out of your motion. Zoning motion. Zoning, right. Oh, that's not. Councillor, just preempting, this is a motion that that Councillor Simon is presenting. It hasn't been seconded at this stage because I don't think anyone else has read it. It's a motion. There's nothing to amend.
Nothing on the table at the moment.
There's nothing on the table to amend.
Can I maybe have a leave at the meeting so we can discuss this? Can I request that?
Leave of the meeting to discuss this, councillors, with the hands. Leave of the meeting is granted. Yep. What are you speaking to, Councillor Simon?
Well, I just want to speak to about the whole topic because I think there's a fair few things that needed to be said, in my opinion, and so therefore that's one or two. And I would have to explain what this huge, massive motion is all about. So that's why I would like to address my fellow elected members.
Okay.
So
The indulgence of the elected members are allowed.
So I'm just, in general, I'm sort of unhappy with this motion. That's why I'm presenting a new one. But the reason for this is really that number one, I think as the elected membership, we need to see the submission that council is going to make to the Barossa Council, and I suppose they've already written that because the submission deadline is by this Friday. So I'm pretty sure that submission is probably already crafted, and before we can endorse it, as what we would be doing with this recommendation, I think it'd be quite important that we actually see it to know what our official council submission to the Barossa Council would be. So I think that's definitely one point, because unfortunately, and that's just facts, is that the LSC, Light Regional Council, has a history of not being really entirely supportive of the Character Preservation Act. And then I got two historic examples. One is in our economic development plan from 2020, it actually lists as the Character Preservation Act as a threat. So it does say, and it could be perceived as an opportunity, but the main thing is it's listed under a threat. So that clearly says that we're not so keen about this. And the second historical thing, in January 2012, in a submission that was been made to the minister, it says clearly that that we wanted to exclude Seppelsfield and other areas out of the Character Preservation Act, and so that development can be further explored unfettered by another layer of legislation. So in 2012, we clearly said we tried to get some of the Character Preservation Act, so that excluded of some areas of our council, so that we can have, in their words, unfettered development. So we have a history of not really supporting that, and because of that, I've had a fair bit of community backlash, let's say, that's telling us, and specifically to that meeting that I went to in the Barossa last week, that is telling LSC that we need to take a stronger stand for this Character Preservation District review. So we need to be better in this, and because the people of Light Council that do live in the Barossa part, they just don't feel properly represented by us. But for them, it is super important that this Character Preservation Act gets strengthened, that we really support them in their plight to do so. So that's what the first sort of two bits of my recommendation really go into this, that we affirm to the community that lives there that we support the Character Preservation Act and this review and for the overlay and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's one thing that's really important. But the second thing as well is, and it says in this report, the Barossa Growth and Infrastructure Strategy, when it's talked about in this report, I really do question the sentence that comes up a couple times, which says, where is it again? Here, it says that the Barossa Growth and Infrastructure Investment Strategy is largely an internal consideration for the Barossa Council. But if you look at what this review actually, or this strategy actually is trying to do, and it says again in our report clearly, it says provide strategic direction for infrastructure planning. It talks about providing greater investment clarity and certainty about where growth will occur. It talks about to support infrastructure necessary for growth. And it talks about directly influencing the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide. So all these points that this strategy is trying to do, they don't stop at the Light River. We should be teaming up with the Barossa to talk about these things and to form a strategy cooperatively, or not just let them do that. So it's not just the notion in this report that this is just something that Barossa is going to do. Maybe going to have some comment to it. I don't think it's strong enough. So again, so these are the other points in this motion that I'm trying to do. So this is really the reason for all of this.
Are there any areas of Craig's report that you are at odds with?
I think that it's a great report, and it's very thorough, and it explains our position and everything. But like I said, we need to know as a council, for me to endorse, to have the CEO or relevant staff to put a submission to the council. Number one, we as a council need to know what that submission is, and as I said, that's probably already been crafted. So in my motion, it says let's just put that on the website. We need to know, and the public needs to know what the council's stance is. We can't just do this behind closed door and nobody knows about it. I think that's very wrong.
Councillor Simon, I think you've had a fair go. I think we'll resume standing orders. We'll move back into our meeting procedures. You'll put a recommendation forward, which is on us. I'm not sure if it's all on the screen yet, but everyone's got a copy and would have had the opportunity to read it, I would think, at this point. Yeah, it seems that we don't have a firm motion because I don't know if everyone's read it yet. It's the motion that's been handed around, and I don't know if we have anyone that's actually seconded this motion at this point either. You'll second that, Councillor Peter? So we have a mover and a seconder of the motion that's been handed around, which is contrary to the recommendation, which is allowed to be, of course. Curry, you'd like to say something?
Thank you. Through the chair, we're just preparing this motion. So if we can just hold one moment while we bring Councillor Zeller's motion up on screen. And we're still typing it out. So just bear with us one moment while we continue through.
The submission hasn't been written at this point. That Craig has just mentioned to me that the submission will be written out of the agenda from this meeting tonight. What's presented, is that correct? Councillor Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. I guess that's what I was a little bit confused about. So to provide comments, including comments as found in this report, particularly the general feedback comments section. I'm struggling to find that section. Is it an attachment, Craig, or is it in the?
No, they start at page 28. Heading central to go to page 27.
Yeah, so that's
a series of points there that become the substance of the submission.
Yeah. Bill, I have a question of Craig, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly.
Craig, I just I want to be sure that the additional bits to this motion does that fit in with your submission and what we are hoping to achieve? Does it extend it or does it cut across it in your view?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you through the chair, Mayor Bill.
Get this at the meeting.
No, councillor Rawlak, I don't think it cuts across anything at all, really. I mean, the submission hasn't been prepared, but it would be built around the matters that are contained in the agenda, as I just mentioned, which I see really aligns with point 5 in the revised in the revised motion or potential motion. So no, really, the first parts are really adding to it. Thank you.
So it's-
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak against this motion. It says, the first thing, it affirms the support of the Character Preservation. The council's never supported the Character Preservation Society. It goes back to 2012, where we did feel it was forced on us by the government, and it was an overzealous character presentation regulation or government rule. So, I mean, it's and for us to vote on this now, is a major statement from our council that we haven't had enough information to make this statement here and now. Yeah, we can, you know, the reason we didn't like it because it restricted people, farmers, building another shed, building a house on the property, restricted what they could do. It was an over powerful preservation order. So there are reasons why we didn't support it. And I don't think we as a council can make this decision on a night like this for this sort of report. You know, we need more information if we're going to make that decision, in my opinion. So I can't support this at this stage.
Thank you, councillor Bill. Further comments, councillors, while we're waiting for the councillor Collins?
So with this submission, it just says appropriate staff to provide a submission to the Barossa Council. So that's staff giving the submission, but do we get to see the submission before you present it?
Well, through the chair, as noted, it's due on Friday, but if we needed to, we'd probably get an extension for that, but I can't say I've asked. Look, I'm happy to circulate a draft, what I'm intending to send, but the process of how you might manage amendments to that would just need to be turned around fairly quickly, that's all, if there were to be any.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is because once it goes in, then it will become public one day, and they'll say you supported that, and they'll say I never saw it before it was submitted. You know, that's the weakness of us as elected members not seeing a submission that's been put in. So I agree with some of this and I agree with some of that, but I disagree with some of that and disagree with some of this. So it's a bit of a. I agree with Bill. That's a lot for us to pass, really, as and I also agree. So yeah, so we're going to have to find a bit of a common ground here, because I think the submission has to be nearly accepted or by us as the elected body before it gets. That's my opinion. Anyway.
Thank you, Colin. I'm not too sure how we deal with this from here. Are there any other speakers at this point, councillor?
It's more a question on a procedural matter. Can we, what's the expression, leave it on the table till next meeting, or you have to make a submission this week?
I think that's the issue. Is it can we have to have it in this week?
Through the chair, the deadline that Barossa has set is the 30th, and it does tie in with, I guess, the project aim that they have. However, the alternate here is if council has some key points they would like to be put in the submission, they can equally make that part of the resolution if there's items that you'd like us to include.
I'm with Councillor Collin. I think councillors have the right to see what's going to go.
Absolutely.
Councillor Bill, this is such an important matter, and it can be very divisive. And I think we all need to absolutely understand what we're supporting or not supporting, and maybe we need a workshop.
Yeah,
to do that.
I don't think we need a workshop. I'm 100% confident in your ability to write a submission. I just I don't want to have any input in the submission, but I'd like to read it. If there's something I don't like, I'd like to be able to tell you I don't like it, and that's pretty well my position. I'm 100% confident that you as a collective can write a very good submission, but I think we'd just like to see it before it's submitted.
Councillor Dean?
I agree with Councillor Close. when this first came up, we objected to it strongly. And there was a great deal of discussion, as I remember, and we objected to the fact that it would affect farmers. And we spoke of, we worked out that we weren't agreeing with it. But the minister, it had to go to the minister, I think. I can't remember. Yes, it did have to go to the minister, and we were overruled. So I think that we need to object again strongly. If we can find the minutes or something of that meeting, I don't know whether we'd have them, but that would give you a good idea of how it was going to affect farmers and what they could do on their land.
Thank you, councillor. Well said. But Craig, if we let this lay on the table, how would that affect the timing of submissions and so forth?
Well, through the chair, Mr. Mayor, we'd simply let the Barossa know that we'd like to have extra time to review the matter. And if I may, if it will assist the council, I understand the question around the character preservation law, but we really are looking at, we've moved beyond that. We are looking at policy or policy positions to put back in relation to a potential code amendment. So it is to some degree technical in what we're looking at and what it's focused upon. Hence, the submission that we'd be looking at is really just responding to the matters that Barossa has raised in its review paperwork to this point. I thought it might just be worth raising that just to put this in context. But in terms of if council would like to lay this on the table, we'd simply advise the Barossa that that was our position and go from there.
Councillor Bill, you'd like to say something?
Mr. Mayor, I think that I'd like to see the motion, put the motion, put a point of order, and if it's lost, I'll move the current recommendation. I move that the motion now be put. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
One's moved.
According to Hoyle and regrettably, councillor Bill, you can't move that formal motion because you've already spoken. That's correct. Councillor Simon?
You've moved the motion.
That's it. We've got a motion and we've got a second, huh?
No, wishes to speak.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this motion? It hasn't already. Yeah. Well, if that's the case, there's no other speakers. I'll go back to councillor Simon and to wrap it up, to close the debate.
Yeah, I mean,
Before we put the motion.
I think I made my point. I think it's very important that we affirm our support for this act, and because we just need to listen to the people from the valley, and that's what I've sort of been doing. So yeah, that's really all I want to say. And the point 5 and 6 is literally what's in the motion that we have today anyway, just with the difference that I think the submission needs to be publicly known so we should put it on our website that we know what that submission is. But I totally concur with what Councillor Collins said about that. Craig his submission will be perfect. I mean, I can see that report is an excellent report, and the points it raised is good, and I have actually no issues that submission is not going to be anything good. What I want is that we can see, as he said, just that we know what we're adopting and that the public can see it. But I think the other points are very important to be made, that we support this review, that we support this act in principle, and that we want to work with the Barossa Council, and I think that's what I'm trying to achieve here.
Councillors, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion's lost.
I'll call for division, please.
All those who voted for the motion, could they stand behind their chair? They'll be recorded in the minutes. Thanks, councillors. Obviously, from the debate and the discussion we've had, and I thank everyone for their input to this. It's a fairly emotional matter as well, I'm sure, and we probably haven't seen anywhere near the last of it. What I'd like to do now is, would someone like to move at the motion that's in the agenda, or an alternative motion?
I'll move the motion in the agenda, Mayor Bill. And I think that whilst it's not as detailed as the one that Councillor Simon has given, there's no reason why some of those things in Councillor Simon's motion, proposed motion couldn't be considered. So it doesn't preclude them, I don't think, and it gives us a little bit of flexibility. And certainly, I think we need to take on board the comments from Councillor Bill and Lynette, because the Barossa also contains people who don't grow grapes, and that needs to be considered.
Councillor Dean, would you words to the effect that dot point 3, taking note of the submission put forward by Councillor Zeller?
I don't think we need to do that formally. I think we just do it.
Okay. We've got a move. I need a seconder for that motion if someone would like to do that. Councillor Bill?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'll move that with the understanding that that submission will be supplied to elected members prior to
Yes.
20%.
And you're happy to second that, Councillor Bill? All those in favour? Yeah.
I'd like to make an amendment to the, I'd just like to put that the submission should be put on our website.
Oh, the submission to be included on the website?
Yeah,
It probably would be.
I think that we should make this stuff
Oh, yeah.
public. So I think that we may delegate appropriate staff to provide a submission to the Barossa Council, and somewhere put in that it's should be on our website, or
Yeah. The amendment you're putting is that the submission we're putting forward is included on council's website. Yep.
yeah. So
Yeah. What's excuse me? As part one.
within part one.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. Let's put it somewhere in part one that
Yeah.
So then if anyone's got grievance, they can come straight to us rather than go to the Barossa Council.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. You can include that, Craig. Harry?
Thank you, and through the chair, councillor Colin, can you please, that in part one and the wording, sorry?
Council to, partner websites. Website, something.
So that in part one, provide a submission to Barossa Council.
Couldn't you just add under part one, that this submission to be put on the website?
Can
That's right. It's on a website.
You talk about the submission in part one, just put this submission to be put on the website.
To be included on council's
I
website.
just need councillor Colin to clarify that one for me because he's the one moving the amendment. Sorry, councillor Bill.
It's put at the bottom of part one, and say that it's to be published on the Light Regional website.
It's to be published on the Light Regional, so the Light Regional website. And so under here, end.
Need a second.
I need a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Fabio, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Think we can move on?
Just
That's right. Yeah. Gary, can you just give us a clarification on exactly what we've ended up with here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got that the original motion, their amendment is that, which we're including now, is that part one, that the submission be published on the Right Regional Council website. That was put and carried, that amendment. And now we'll look to you, Mayor Bill, to put the motion as included, with the amendment included.
I thought we did that. I need to put that motion with the additional wording. Would someone like to move that way? We already has. Okay, I thought we had. So,
Could I just, for clarity's sake, please, where it says on that last line in the section one, submission be published on the Light Regional Council website? Just for
Thank
the
you, councillor
sake of
Fabio.
consistency. Thank you.
I'm looking for what you want.
To the motion that is now. Wishes to speak to him.
Which ones? Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. So we'll just be looking to you now to put the motion as amended, which is on screen for everyone to look at.
I'll go back to councillor Dean to close the debate. Councillor Dean, anything further? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure whether I was asleep, but did we miss 11.1?
Most unusual.
Seconded it.
Look, thanks everybody for your contribution into that matter. It's obviously it's going to be an ongoing topic on our agenda without doubt, and it'll be a moving feast for a while as well till all the submissions are put in, and both councils have had a chance to assess the position. So thanks everybody for your contribution. Councillors, we're up to our 11.3, the Asset Management Plan Strategic Document Review. There's a recommendation about a third of the way down page 15. I'll call on Megan Renzella. Megan's got a small, short presentation for us to attach to this report. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, elected members. Okay, so the purpose of the report is more about process. So I've got a small presentation just to talk about the process that relates to our infrastructure and asset management plan. You've seen this slide before. This is highlighting some of our key strategic documents. There's obviously more, but the main one and our first one is our strategic plan. The strategic plan is the highest level plan that other plans need to make sure they take into consideration, make reference to. Other plans that are developed also sit under this. So the IAMP, our Infrastructure and Asset Management Plan, refers to the assets that council has and needs to have to deliver on the strategic management plan. Talks about what level of service do our assets need to meet and to deliver on that strategic plan. Not in the right order. Okay, the order of the lines that appear is a little bit different. So the circle talks about the IAMP and the long-term financial plan. They go together, they go hand in hand. These are reviewed and audited by ASCOSA. The annual business plan and budget is then where we have to report on that through our annual reporting. And again, we've got the two that go together. So together, the IAMP and the long-term financial plan tell us what is required financially to maintain a level of service of our assets, and it's subjected to that review by ASCOSA with the alignment that we need to make sure we are being financially sustainable. So our recommendation today for the report acknowledges a need for a review. It's legislated we must review within 2 years of a new council anyway. And so what this report is focusing on is that process, not the detail. So the asset management plan, it takes the whole of life approach to the assets, highlights the different service levels. It balances our costs, risks, opportunities, and the performance, and has a strategic approach. The detail that comes out of that then is where the programs are developed. You would have seen this slide before, which just talks about our asset management plan, the different asset groups that we have, and a little bit of information about that. We have our unsealed road network, a bit of information about that. I understand that's topical at the moment with our council. And this is just the table that identifies, I guess, our ratio of how many class 1 roads we might have, class 2, class 3 and 4 and 5. Class 5 is the lighter blue. So when our and our sheeted roads with our service level summary, this is something that is identified in the IAMP, and the programs that are developed out of that from the service levels that have already been adopted by council. So, you know, even if we class a grade of class 1 road, for example, we've spoken about our minimum grades. Some roads, though, on an inspection may need an additional grade, and I think Bethel Road's a classic example of that. So you would have seen our table that comes out in the capital asset renewal program within the 4-year program in the Sustainability and Infrastructure Committee. And you'll note that they might be slightly different from year to year. What I wanted to highlight in this slide was that after we have done the last IAMP, so 2021, we proposed for this coming financial year, $1.7 million for grading of our rural sheeted roads for maintenance. Now what we've got is the following year was 1.9 mil, and then we've now got in this current financial year proposed 2.4. So what I'm suggesting is the figures have already increased. So our condition audit informs us on the overall condition of our asset base. That's something we really need to know. Knowing that condition helps us allocate the funding and the resources to manage our assets better and prioritise the work. It also helps us to improve the overall condition of the assets and meet our service standards. So we're currently underway for trade and sport assets. We're hoping to have that completed July. And we'll have a workshop with the elected members so we can tell you, what that actually means for council. The future funding requirements may change once that has been done, and that will of course then inform a program of works. So the outcomes we're wanting from that is an improvement to our infrastructure standards, fully funded levels of service, and effective and a sustainable management of our assets. So what do we do from here? We prepare our roadmap. We have the workshop with our elected members on once we've got the latest data on our assets. We set those levels of service. We review the road classifications. That's the opportunity then to review the classifications. Undertake a financial analysis to understand the funding requirements for the capital and the maintenance work. So once we know what our levels of service are going to be, the road classifications, if they need to be reviewed, we can then do some modelling, financial modelling, and once that's been agreed upon, it's incorporated into the long-term financial plan. Just pretty much repeating the previous slide, but in the format of how we're going to do it for the next steps. So the next step for us is that presentation to council and a workshop on the audit findings. Which brings us back to the report.
Thank you so much, Megan. Councillors, are there any questions at this point? Councillor Collins?
Megan, so all this stuff was going to get done anyway, wasn't it? So this review is being done as we speak. So why do we need a recommendation to do it again?
I don't think that's how the recommendations sort of speaks. It's talking about commencing a process of reviewing strategic management plans, etc. Yeah, Richard might put more clarity.
Yeah, through the chair. I think what's been highlighted in the community consultation is that that council is probably or the community doesn't consider that it's investing in its road network enough. And the elected members can either make a decision on that with information or without information. And our suggestion is that you would make it with information, and that information would come through a review of the IAMP, and that review will follow the condition assessment, which is currently being done. That will give elected members the best possible information to make a decision on. Whereas at the moment, we would consider that a decision would be made without the good technical advice that would be provided to you through an IAMP review. And hence we believe that to show that support to the community, that we would have a recommendation that commits to reviewing that IAMP and the resultant increase in funding, but that resultant increase would be done at a scientific level to give the elected members the confidence to either commit more money to it or commit a different amount of money to it.
Thank you, Richard, for that clarity. Any further questions, councillors?
But the IAMP has already been done. The process of the IAMP is already happening, isn't it?
The current IAMP. We have a current IAMP.
No, we have a current IAMP, and at this point we wouldn't be looking to review it. What's being reviewed as part of our overall asset management valuation is a condition assessment. It just so happens that this year we're doing a condition assessment on our transport assets.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan, for that, and thank you for your report. Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll have a recommendation about a third of the way down the page if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Fabio and Councillor Lind. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Fabio?
Just, if I may, through the chair, my understanding of this obviously is that, and I think there's no surprise here when we speak about looking at increasing funding to the road network. We have to be clear that we have the right information in front of us, and this is what I believe we're voting on here, is to make sure that when we do make those decisions and we ask for an additional amount of money, that money, if allocated, is based on the fact that we're reviewing factual information and not just going on on hearsay or whatever. And that basically will give us justification, I guess, for any increased spending, or even if it's the current spending, to know that we're spending it in the right areas as well. So hence, I'll support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Fabio. Any further questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. So through, I guess, the process of engaging with community members in, I guess, the ward that I was elected in, overwhelmingly, the feedback is of a nature that would necessitate a review of the IAMP in order for it to be responded to appropriately. So hence I did have a motion on notice that was fairly similar to this. So I'll support this motion, but I will say that I think we should, and it'll be up to the elected body to decide, decouple the requests that are in the other motions on notice for additional funding in this particular budget for this financial year, whilst we await the condition assessment that is being undertaken to inform decisions that are made about future budgets, infrastructure. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Councillor Michael. Any further speakers? No further speakers? I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. Thank you, Megan, for your presentation. Now we come to the important item on our agenda tonight, a very important item, I should say, on our agenda tonight, is the adoption of the annual business plan and budget, long-term financial plan, and the declaration of our rates for 23-24, and the adoption of the schedule of fees and charges. Before we open up for discussion, I might ask Nigel if he'd like to just help us through the any updates that we might have, and then speak us through the recommendation also to help us along. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. 4 things that I probably need to refer to. First of all, if you go to page 55 of the report, there's a comment there about the budget impact. And unfortunately, this is the problem of using previous year reports. It talks about the approval of the 22-23 budget. So if you could scrub that out and make it the 23-24, please, just so we've got it fully correct. On page 51, and here we're talking about the rebates for educational purposes, which are mandatory, at least 75%. There was one added this year. It's the last one in that large table, assessment number 10454. Notice how it says Trinity College Gawler Inc. Well, we're not going to be giving a discretionary rebate for the college in Gawler. That should have noted that that relates to the part construction of the college at Roseworthy. So we've just received a small valuation for the works that have progressed thus far. So if you wouldn't mind making that note. The other thing that we always do as a matter of practice is that we like you to adopt the final valuation for the year, which Matter of General's week 52. So I think you've all got before you the final number, not a big variation from the last time you've seen, and the impact on rate and revenue is $146. So that's not going to make much of a difference, but we will have the final reconciled assessment if you include those numbers, because it's such a, and that's in 2 places. So that's firstly under item 4. So there's the total valuation of the region, and there's also the assessable value, those that are rateable. So if you wouldn't mind including those in the final recommendation. It also affects the regional landscape levy, which everybody pays. The amount also needs to be changed, the valuation, but because it's such a small increase, it doesn't affect the rate in the dollar. So that will remain the same. The final thing I was going to say as well, probably building a bit on what Megan mentioned about ASCOSA, probably just a bit of an update regarding ASCOSA. They're looking forward to receiving our business plan as soon as possible, and our first briefing from them with the LGAs on the 17th of July. So I'm very keen to see the outcome of this process so that we can get on with that. Megan did mention financial sustainability. Obviously, one of the first things I look at to see whether the asset management plan aligns to the financial plan. But the other key thing that they get a lot of publicity about is that they're interested in the rates that you declare. And the first thing they do is compare it to the CPI. So I think at this stage, based on the draft, we're probably going to come out okay with that. Some others may not. So that's my comments on the report. Thanks, Mayor Bill.
Thank you, Dr. Nigel. Any questions, Councillor Fabio?
Just one, Nigel, if I may, through the chair.
Certainly.
You may mention briefly about the Gawler, Trinity College at Gawler, whatever. I'm just wondering whether asset number 5767, Catholic Church Hamley Bridge, would fall into that same category where it's not actually within our council boundary.
That is a very good question. I suspect so. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm guessing that probably is also the rate paid as opposed to the actual parcel of land. I'll certainly take that on notice and let everybody know.
It's an excellent pickup, councillor Fabio. That's what we're here for. Further questions, councillors?
Through the chair, I questioned that last year about that Catholic church, and it's right on the border.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think you'll find it's right on the border of our council. Because I couldn't understand why it was there at all, but it's a little church, it's a little church that's not in Hamley Bridge. It's outside. If you look it up on the cemeteries things, you'll find it's there. Okay?
Thanks, councillor.
Mayor
Councillor
Bill, if there are no more questions, I'd like to, in fact, I will move the recommendation as it's outlined here. And I'd like to speak to it too.
Thank you, councillor Dean. Floor is yours.
I believe the proposed budget and annual business plan is fair, is balanced and responsible. And to be true to say, I think that if you read through the submissions, it's generally supported with some comments that we need to take note of. I think looking through them, around about 6 or so submissions, we're in support of council improving the maintenance of our roads and the service level for our rural roads. There are about, I think, 4 or reasonable number like that in support of economic development and tourism. There are a few in support of council social responsibilities, and there were some that were specifically directed. So there's a fair range of responses received. And also there was a significant number who expressed appreciation for the fact that the rate increase was less than the inflation rate by a considerable amount. And so we have for the last 2 years, if this budget is passed as it's proposed, in real terms, in terms of purchasing power, reduced our budget. Even though the dollar number's gone up, the actual buying power has gone down. And so we've tightened our belts as I think we feel that we need to in these difficult times. There's been some, I guess I perhaps might say that the budget board has helped us do that. Without that, we probably couldn't have. Council staff have analysed the submissions, and there's some argument about whether they've done that correctly. But to my view, I think they have responded and pointed out that we have had, in fact, already increased our reshedding program by 27% from last year to this year. And so we've already taken into account the comments that were made by people leading up to this budget period and in the sorry, I've forgotten the word, I'll leave that. So passing the motion now has no impact on the ability to move and debate any of the motions or notice, in my view. There's none are suggesting a change in the rating and total revenue numbers. Instead, it's focusing on a distribution adjustment within the total budget amounts for future council actions. Any such changes can be accommodated via budget reviews. So to my mind, we need to pass this budget as it is, and then we can adjust the annual business plan if that is the wish of council later on, and not too much later on, maybe at the first budget review if we need to. So that's my reasons for moving the motion.
Thank you, councillor Dean. Do I have a second? To this?
Yes.
Councillor Dean. Councillor Peter.
Mr Mayor, there are 2 motions on notice, item 14.1, which is mine, and 14.2, which I believe comes from councillor Zeller. Could they or would they be included in this consideration?
of moving that motion is attached to this, if you come prepared tonight to inform the council that where the funds are going to be reallocated from to accommodate your motion.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you move your
sorry.
mic a bit closer, please?
I'm sorry.
No, I don't propose interpreting the budget to decide where the money is coming from. It's a bigger picture, and I think it should be considered further. In adjustment. I'm not going to suggest changing or reducing any numbers of any items.
What's his recommendation? What's in the motion? The advice I've been given that anything from 14.1 or 14.2 to be put into this budget will need to show where it's going to be put within this budget. Otherwise, they'll be dealt with as separate matters.
Sorry, I'll just clarify. What we've currently got is we've currently got the recommendation that was included in the agenda has been moved and seconded, and Councillor Peter has asked the question, what do we do with 14.1 and 14.2? So in relation to 14.1 and 14.2, as I understand it, they stand alone, and should an elected member wish to incorporate any components of those two motions into a motion that is already on the table, it would need to be done by moving an amendment to the recommendation, and that amendment to the recommendation would need to be made very clear of how that's going to be incorporated into the into the motion, which is currently on the table being debated. So,
Discuss separately.
Turn your mic on, please.
If they were going to affect the budget, why weren't they brought forward?
Because their motions on notice. This budget was prepared well before the motions were on notice were put. That's what they are. Councillor Zeller?
If I can speak to this motion, I think between 0.1 and 15, everything looks really good except 0.2, which is adoption of an annual business plan, and 0.3, adoption of the annual budget. So I'm just going to vote against this, and then once we come to the motion on notice, we see what happens then, and then we just have to come back and adopt the budget once if we see what happened with those motions on notice. I mean, that seems to be the only way to go.
Just a procedural matter. Mayor Bill, if I can make a comment. If we pass the what has been moved and seconded, that does not preclude those two motions being considered, and if they gain support, passed or passed in any modified form. In fact, if you look at 14.2, that actually says, just get to it, that the council amend the 23-24 annual business plan to increase. At the present time, there's no annual business plan in the past, but if we pass it, there is. And then we can decide whether we're going to make those changes. Yeah. So I can't see why you need to go to the laborious business of trying to work out where you're going to stick that in the motion when you can do it separately and have the same effect. And the same applies to your motion, Councillor Peter, that that actually is asking to provide a report for the July meeting. So that's totally independent. You can ask. And if that is passed after we've passed them, 11.4, there's no reason why it needs to be done before or with it. The effect will be the same if it's passed there or then, but just more complicated if we try and jam it all into the motion. You know how hard it is to try and do motion changes on the run. It drives you around the twist. And it takes a lot of time and we all get confused. We keep them separate.
Councillor
The
Dino,
final result won't be any different,
Councillor
but
Dino,
it'll be simpler.
I might have to pull you up. We're into debate and we shouldn't be. You've already spoken. On that.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Bill.
I need to pull you up because we are getting into a debate where we shouldn't be, and you've already spoken.
Sorry, Mayor Bill, it was a discussion about procedure. It wasn't about the actual content of the debate. So it wasn't an argumentative debate. It was about the procedure.
No, it's just the way I do it, I guess, and that I felt that I have pulled other people up, so I needed to do that. But I think that it's quite clear what's Councillor.
This is procedure as well. Sorry, this is procedure as well. So we've had Richard telling us that we should do an amendment of this, of what's going on. But and I like you what you said, Dean, sounds a lot more practical to me. But so if we were to vote one of the two that are later on, the motions on notice, or the latter one that actually is changing the budget, that is allowed if we accept this budget and pass it now. Is that?
Well, they're two separate items in how I see it. Is that we've got a recommendation in front of us to pass this particular budget. Now we've got motions on notice down here to amend something, as Councillor Dean has said, it doesn't exist. It hasn't been adopted. So till it's adopted, we can't operate on that. When it is adopted, these two motions then can be debated and can go where they end up. Make sense? It doesn't make sense the other way to be debating something to put into a budget that hasn't been adopted.
I just don't want to get caught short if we pass this budget and then we want to make that motion on notice gets through and then we get told we can't do it because the budget's already been passed.
We can do budget variations whenever we like.
Dr. Nigel, the sage, could I refer this to you to some clarification? I can see the points, they're obvious, but you know, I've made a part ruling that I think that they should be kept separate.
This isn't going to necessarily help the situation. My view of the regulation guides reviews, not long ago was changed. It says that you can't do budget amendments until November.
Can't move budget amendments until
November. And if you look at the reports I do on budget reviews and on even the monthly reports, I refer to that regulation every time to actually reinforce that situation. There's a particular reason for those changes. The intent is to, when a council adopts a budget, to enable it to be bedded in, to enable the staff to confidently get along and do it. Yeah. And the other end of it, just for information, is that you can't actually do anything after May. So there shouldn't be any lightning changes towards the end of the year, obviously, because the staff don't have the ability to implement it. That's my understanding of the regulation.
Thank you, Councillor. Dr. Nigel, that's very helpful. Everyone's I guess the burning question though, that's going to remain is what do we do? What's the next step? Does anyone else wishing to speak on this matter that hasn't spoken? Hasn't spoken twice? Councillor Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Bill, and thanks, Dr. Nigel, who's trying to find that in the regulation, the Acts, before I press my button. Procedurally, my preference would be that we bring forward the motions on notice, deal with those, and that they're then adopted, and then incorporated once adopted into this budget in that order.
Bring them forward.
Yeah,
Separate to this.
that would be my preference. Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know if we need a motion to vote on that or not.
Excuse me.
Yeah, this one that we laid on the table, and then we bring others forward.
That's right. Mm. Yeah, that's
Either lay on the table or defer until the other two are dealt with. Another way to do it.
Carrie, I might ask you for a little bit of guidance.
Thank you, through the chair. Currently, we have a motion on the table. Unless someone would like to make a formal motion that the matter be adjourned, or an amendment be made from someone who has not spoken to the motion. That is how the matter can be dealt with.
That's the advice, councillors. I guess a formal motion could be put, but as you've outlined, Councillor Michael, that this matter lay on the table and these two matters be brought forward. Is that the case, Carrie? Am I expressing myself correctly?
If you're, I would suggest adjourning the item. You'll need to advise when the item will be adjourned till at a further meeting, and you would nominate your date of the meeting.
No, we'll do it tonight. The date of the meeting's now.
So there is a motion then that is current.
We're asking whether we put that as a formal motion, which would then allow these two matters to be brought forward.
Yeah,
That's what we're trying to achieve, through what Councillor Michael's trying to achieve.
Yeah, so short answer is no. Currently, we have this motion. You wouldn't adjourn it to later in the meeting. You would be adjourning it to another meeting.
Okay.
So you cannot currently bring an item forward at this point in time until you deal with this motion. The only other way you can bring those other matters in is by way of an amendment to this motion, because we have this motion on the table.
Question, is it possible to
Hang on,
to have a,
Councillor Dean. Richard, I think, I'm sorry, say something.
Yeah, just to continue from what Carrie was just saying and further to my earlier commentary, bringing a motion forward cannot be done while there is a motion on the table. What I think people are trying to consider and what I suggested was you move an amendment to that recommendation that is up there. And you need to be prepared to move a recommendation, I think, in either 2 or 3 with the words that are cobbled together from 14.1 and 14.2. That said, there is Councillor Ross, Councillor Fabio, Councillor Close, and Councillor Emery are the only ones who have not spoken and are the only ones who can move or second an amendment. So as we've heard in some of our training, we get to the point where a decision will be forced upon you to either vote on the matter that is on the table at the moment, which is 11.4, as was highlighted in the agenda, or one of those 4, move an amendment and make that clear to the minute taker what that's going to be.
Thank you, Richard. Look, I think to accommodate the two motions that are on there, they probably do need to be separate, and they can be voted on separately. If they've got the numbers, they've got the numbers. I think Councillor Ross had some concerns in relation to them never getting any airplay if the budget's adopted. That's not the case. I mean, there's always budget reviews each quarter, so there's always an opportunity to do just that. Councillor Ross, I'm not sure if I can take another question.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Right.
I'd like to take Simon's, Councillor Simon's, motion on notice and put that in somewhere.
Yeah, that's what we need to know.
Or stick it in the budget.
Know what you're trying to say, Councillor Collins, but it doesn't quite work that way, regrettably. I think that unless it can be articulated fairly clearly for the record, that I can't accept it.
You just make it 16, or that doesn't work. Oh.
That's Nigel? Councillor Nigel. We wish.
No, that's not doing it. So it's time is not.
Councillors, I think we should have come prepared. That's not really
No, the motion's
time for
written.
this.
The motion's written.
Excuse me?
The motion's written, so we've got the writing. We just got to know where to stick it. So you just get, yeah, I can read it out to you. We just got to find a place to put it in the,
Councillor Dean?
I suggest that a place you could put it is a number 2, where it says, for the financial year, et cetera, adopts annual business plan incorporating minor program adjustments. Put it in there, incorporating, and then put your motion in and other minor program adjustments.
yep, that sounds, yep, thank you.
That would
Dan.
be the only place I think I can see where it can go, having looked through it.
So to be clear, the motion just says, oh, sorry, the capital works spend.
I'll get you to slow down, councillor Ross, sorry, I'm in it.
So it's already in here, so it's a motion that's 14.2. But it says the council amend the 2023-24 annual business plan to increase capital works spending in year 4 capital works program 2000.
Yes.
Yep.
Just to clarify, so so that council, so what are we're inputting in section, sorry, I missed that, where we're going, where we're putting this information.
Number 2.
So that in
Go up to number 2.
point 2.
It's getting hard. This doesn't make sense to me.
So councillor Collins, sorry, we're at this point where that in point 2, the wording include, and you're asking us to take the full item?
Yep, the full motion.
Full motion. The full. Correct.
Let's not talk between ourselves, councillors.
We're taking the full.
Councillors. It's not.
So can you just clarify the points here, because we've taken the full motion. So I just want to clarify what the wording is.
Yep, that's right.
Through the chair. So this is the motion that we have, was the amendment to be included in the motion. Is that correct?
Councillor Collin, that's the wording that you've put. That's the amendment. That was the amendment.
To assist the elected members, would it be worth putting the whole of dot point 2 so we can see how it reads in its entirety?
Richard's just going to clarify. We've got to get this right. We don't, we're going to be in problem with the SCOSA if no one else.
Okay, through the chair, in my reading of the way in which dot point 2 is now written, grammatically, it probably doesn't make any sense to me. I think I'm probably getting nods, and while not my role, I will make a couple of suggestions that might make it easier for the elected members to vote on the amendment.
Councillors, I might just suggest that we suspend standing orders for 5 minutes so we can have this discussion, because we're all getting a little bit out of order, and I can't keep control of that, and I don't want to stifle people's comments either if possible. So hands up for suspending standing orders for 5 minutes or so. Thanks, councillor. So we can now. Thanks, Fabio.
If I may just propose, get rid of the word amend and put incorporate into the blah, 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 blah. And then just get rid of the last bit, the last incorporate bit. Yeah, you know, it needs to come up on. Needs to come up on. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think in terms of the and agree with you, Councillor Fabio. I think that's along the right lines. However, I'd probably come up higher into this dot point 2, where it says adopts the annual business plan incorporating, and then words probably to the effect of an increase of $180,000 towards the 2.6 million from a reallocation of funds, and an increase of $150,000 towards materials, contracts and other towards road maintenance. And I think if those words are in there, then you are actually adopting an annual business plan, including those items.
I think what we've got to be very careful of too, that what went out on public consultation, so we're allowed minor changes to that. So with some of the wording, we have to be a bit careful what we take away, because it might not become a minor change in the end. It might be a major change.
Dinner's ready, Bill, when you are.
Right, so. Think it might be me on the barbie tonight. We're trying to include the motions on notice into this particular document. No, this is Councillor Simon's, Councillor Collins' recommendation. That seems to be able to be accommodated. I'm not sure about the other one. The other one's actually calling for a report. It's really quite different. I think Councillor Peters is a little bit different.
We talk.
Yeah, you can talk now at the moment because we're out of we're on hold.
Oh, sorry, we're allowed to talk now. Are we allowed to have discussions then with?
I was just going to stand the orders for a moment, yeah.
Yours, separately. They did, I was just in order, it was confusing. Because yours is joint
Yes.
So if you do the separately, otherwise you'll have another next stuff. Where does the thing of 14.2? Just was it trying to incorporate 14.2 into the bid because that was going to do that. According to the other changes,
If you can take your seats again, I think we might be on our way. Yep, that's why I'm asking for attention now. We said 5 minutes. I think we've had a good 10.
So that's,
Perhaps it's the road maintenance budget increasing it to 207. Yep.
Right, so what's the final?
Sorry, I should. You happy with that? Because that's your amendment now.
I just said, materials of contracts, but if you, on your advice, if you don't think it's necessary, I'm pretty happy. It's basically what was asked in the motion, or in the motion assignment, so I'm happy with my amendment. With that amendment.
Need a seconder for the amendment. Thanks, Councillor Michael.
Wishes to speak on it.
That's, we can go to the.
We're only putting.
Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment?
Not on me.
Not on.
Yeah, I'd like to speak, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Bill.
I'd like to speak against the amendment, Mr Mayor. We've spent, we're asking a fair bit of reallocation from the budget. We've already asked them for 392,000 they had to reallocate from the budget. We're asking for another 330,000, which is about 1% of the budget. So we're asking them to take another 1% out. And we've already increased in the budget, they've increased from 1.9 to 2.4 the expense spending on the scheduled roads. So I think we're expecting a fair bit from the council to do that. And I noted one of the applications to the budget questionings was from Mr. Ryan saying he wanted rates to be kept down low. So we're already pushing the rates. We kept them low, but we're now instigating increasing our spending by another 1% to do that, to cover this cost. And I doubt whether they'll be able to reallocate it. I'm sure it'll just end up to be on the end of the budget next year. The increased spending will increase by 300,000. So if we're prepared to take that, that's all well and good. I'm not against spending on roads because I think we certainly know how much they need, but we've got to fund everything else as well. And we've asked a fair bit from the council staff at the moment, I think, or the council budget at the moment.
Councillor Dean.
Mayor Bill, I'd like to speak against the motion as well. And the reason why I do so is, like Councillor Bill, I'm not opposed to spending more money on roads. In fact, I think that's a good move, but it does need to be done in a systematic fashion. And what we're being asked to do with this motion is buy a pig in a poke, because we really have no idea where the money is going to be reallocated from and what impact that might have on service levels in other sections. So we've consulted on the budget, which I believe was balanced across all sections. And now we're saying, okay, we will, at the very last minute, say, okay, we want to give more money to roads, we'll take it somewhere else, without saying where. We're not consulting on it. So it may well be that if we adopt this amendment, what will happen if it's then passed as part of the budget is that somewhere down the line, someone's going to be disadvantaged. They didn't think they were going to be. because the consultation process didn't do it, didn't mention it. Therefore, it is extremely important, I believe, that we don't act in a random and ad hoc manner, and in a manner which I have to say would be disrespectful to our ratepayers and which is not procedurally fair. I can't be a party to that, even though I think that this redirection of some funds, if it could be achieved, might be worth considering, but only in a systematic manner. And this is not a systematic manner. It's been a dog's breakfast of a process trying to cobble together an amendment, which is actually, to put it mildly, very shonky procedure and very poor governance. And I don't want to be party to that. If there was a suggestion, for example, that we call for a report to investigate things along the lines of that amendment for consideration for a future budget review, taking into account Nigel says that could happen. Let's face it, we've got money to spend now, so any additional money that we approve won't happen early, it'll happen later. So there wouldn't be any great disaster doing that, I don't think, in terms of time if you wanted to do that. But to do it in this way makes us an absolute rabble. The only word I can use to describe it. Because it is not systematic, it's not thought out, the impact of it is not known. Why would you do something where you don't really know the impact you're going to have on others, unsuspecting people? So I'm strongly opposed to adding to this amendment, but I'm not opposed to at some stage, even later in the meeting, if we want to consider the original motion from Simon, amended to make that a report to look at the implications. And there are many. As a council, we have a responsibility, and this is in the Act and the regulations, to make sound, unbiased decisions based upon all the facts. We don't have all the facts. This amendment fails that test.
Thank you, councillor Dean. Anyone else like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Peter?
Are we still in discussion mode or?
No, we're in discussion mode on the amendment. We've got a
No,
mover, and did we have a seconder? We've got a mover and a seconder for the amendment, and we're in discussion on the amendment.
Right, I'll make a comment. The function of the elected council is to decide policy. The function of the council administration is to execute that policy. And so if we propose something as a policy and we put it to the council administration, it is for them to devise a way around or a way through the problem and then come back to us and present it. And you'll notice that in item 14.1, I called for a report and I proposed 4 years of figures. Now, I think item 14.2 is substantially the same. It just proposes a lower schedule of the figures.
14.2 is not proposing a report.
No, it's not.
There's a difference. Thanks, councillor Peter. Anything further? Councillor Michael? Oh, I think you've actually spoken, councillor Michael. Are you
Not on the amendment. No.
Not the amendment?
No. No. I just said. So I guess I'll speak in favour of the amendment. I respect all the comments that councillor Dean made around process and governance. But I think the points made by councillor Kennelly resonate with me in particular in the context of previous discussions we've had in chambers and in workshops around the role of the elected body. We routinely reminded that it's our role to set strategic and policy direction for the council. We've gone out to ratepayers for consultation on our budget and our business plan. Overwhelmingly, when I read the feedback and through my own engagement, overwhelmingly the feedback is more money for infrastructure and in particular rural roads. And on that basis, although the design of the amendment may not be perfectly scientific, as councillor Dean's pointed out, it is a setting of priorities. It is a setting of priorities that's based on consultation with ratepayers and the community. So on that basis, I don't think it's a haphazard decision by, if the motion's carried, by the elected body to reappropriate funds for some other purpose. So for those reasons, I agree with the amendments in response to councillor Bill's concerns. You know, the proposal was not to increase revenue to fund this initiative. The proposal is to fund it through savings. And in my view, it's the role of, council officials and managers to attempt to make those decisions and to advise the elected body if they're unable to do so. So I'll be voting in favour of it. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to make a comment that hasn't? No, I'm speaking.
Yeah, I agree with everything Dean said, but I think the reason we've been pushed to this position is that we didn't probably have clarity early enough on where we wanted to spend the money, which I think it's going to be a lesson for setting the budget next year, that if we can get a little bit more involved earlier, we'll get our ideas out there earlier. I think also it's not a new thing that this amount of money has been discussed. It has been discussed a fair bit, and Simon moving the motion, I think, should have been brought forward in front of this, and then it might have been easier. I do agree this process has seemed ugly, probably the easiest thing to say, but with the money, I think that people have come to me and, you know, I've just had Bethel Road's another example just in the last few days. Like, you know, if you can go and stick a bit of rubble where it's needed and actually fix the road, a little with patches of the road that are really bad, I think that would be a good thing. I also think that the resheeting program, everyone's arguing it's another 420 grand more than last year, but it's still 420 grand more than 10 years ago. So for 10 years, we've spent the same money and the roads have got to a deteriorated rate where we're going to have to spend money. And I'm sure this IAMP is going to prove that this money is needed and it'll be well spent. So hopefully everyone can support the amendment.
Thank you, councillor Coleman. Anything further, anybody? If not, we might put the amendment. All those in favour? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. That's right. If everyone's clear that that's the amendment now is incorporated in the annual business plan and budget that we're asking you to adopt. But I'll put that out for questions, of course, first before we go through the process. There's only a couple of people that apparently that haven't spoken on this. No, Councillor Allison hasn't. Yeah. Councillor Allison, Councillor Bill did. Oh no, he only spoke on the amendment. No, he didn't. No.
No, not on the original motion.
So anyone that hasn't spoken on the original motion, would you like to? I guess that's the easiest way. But if not, I might just about put this. We've had a long discussion. Question? Councillor Simon?
Just got a question. I noticed in the in that really lengthy motion, there is, I think it's, actually that it is in point 2, it says that an abridged version of the annual business plan for distribution to ratepayers with the first quarterly notice will be included or something like that, which obviously it's always has been that way. So I'm just wondering, is it possible that we could include, during this consultation process, I've noticed that several people saying that they never really know what's going on. They don't know about these public consultation stuff because they don't look on our website, which is a fair point. They say that they don't look at the things, whatever that might be. But they ask if it's possible to get like a database or like an email.
The whole lot, the whole budget.
To get a mailing list for people can sign up to that are interested, and then whenever there is a public notice or if there might be like a media release or news or anything, that they automatically get that thing. I'm just wondering if that's something that we can. I mean, it doesn't have to be right now, but I mean, if that's something that we could include, and what would be the best way to do that? But all we would have to do is
develop a mailing list. Just to develop a mailing list for people to.
Yeah, just so that with our rates and all this is that we include this abridged version of our business plan. We could send out a little form saying if you want to be on our mailing list for future thing, sign up for it.
That's not a problem.
Answer that. Through the chair, we're definitely working our way towards having a much more informed community, and what you're suggesting is one of the things that we have on our list at the moment.
Yep, that's not a problem, and most of that will probably also include expanded services library at the library, where people can go in there and get information too. That is exactly what you're talking about. Thanks, Councillor Simon. Do we put this to the vote?
Not yet, Councillor Dean. The original mover.
Councillor Dean was the original mover. Would you like to close the debate, Councillor Dean?
Not much I want to say. I think the amendment will create some problems, but I have a lot of confidence in Richard and the staff to do that without making a particular section of the community suffer, because that's my great concern that could happen. But other than that, I'm sure the money will be spent if it's put there. So I commend the budget motion to you.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. All those in favour? That's passed and that's unanimous. Thanks so much, councillors, and thank you for your indulgence with my mistakes and my bumbling tonight. We now might take 20 minutes for tea. It's a little break. But congratulations, everybody, and the spirit of how this was debated also is to be commended. So thank you. Okay. I'll seek leave of the meeting. Can you put your hands up, please, councillors? Hands up. Thank you. I would ask if we could consider bringing 16.2, pardon me, our confidential items forward. We don't have very much after that, but if we could bring that forward, our guests will be able to head off home a little bit earlier. Could I have someone move that way? Thanks, Councillor Michael and Councillor Allison. All those in favour? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. Well, I need someone now to move that we head into confidential session. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Collin. Someone like to second that? Councillor Allison. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillors, we're all in confidential session. Oh, okay. Well, I'm in trouble still. The lengthy meeting agenda. The questions on notice, and I thank councillors for putting these questions on notice like this, because it does give the council staff an opportunity to answer them. It also lets our residents know who read the minutes or look at minutes on the perhaps on the website or whatever, the answers to some of those questions. And the first one there being one from footpaths at Wasleys Field Estate from Councillor Michael. And that's been tabled in the meeting agenda. And then we go to, where do we go to? 12.2, the ceiling of Wasleys Road, again from Councillor Michael. Where's that? Is that gone anywhere? Response was tabled. Where's the response? Table. Oh, okay. The response was tabled in the agenda on, I believe, so it's not in this section. We don't need to move a second. We need a mover and a second. Oh, pardon me. Are there any questions without notice, councillors? Councillor Ellison.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. So through the chair, elected members, along with Mayor Bill, Richard and Craig, have received an email from me in relation to the dam breaching its banks on Torts Road and spilling out across Torts Road, and now it's made its way down to Red Banks Road and then has flooded out into the paddock down there of Jason McDonald's. But first of all, I just wanted an update because I had been working with Richard since Friday, and I thank him for looking into that on Friday morning. It wasn't so bad on Friday when Richard had a look and then we had a discussion on it, but Sunday it breached its banks, and you would have seen that by the photos that I sent everybody. So my question is, as per my email, just an update on where that's at. I noticed today that they had large excavator there putting some dirt back into the crack. So we're now due for another lot of rain that's coming from up north. I'll be interested to see where it goes. But I'm thinking that that's the first breach. They're allowed 3 a year. Is that correct? That was a question I wanted to just find out. That was something that Lisa had mentioned a little while back. I haven't spoken to her recently.
Chair, just in first order, yeah, we're aware that there was work done today and they've patched the part which topped over, which spilled. There's some related work that our group are looking at as well in terms of just clearing the V drain along next to that, and then the culvert that goes under Kangaroo Flat Road as well. But really what we're doing is basically maintaining a dialogue with the developer and their contractors, not just on the breach. I think we're expanding that also now to look at how the basin is being managed as well. Now, for a return to the patchwork that they've done, because of the nature of the weather, it's not compacted as yet. It's basically just filling the gap with soil, as I understand it. Seen some images of that Gavin's team shared with us this afternoon. Now, to your other question, there isn't a number of breaches, spills, as far as what's allowed. It's a complicated process, if you will, in that the developers are required to keep the stormwater that's generated by their development. They're allowed to let pre-development flow pass through. I won't venture too far into that. It gets even more complicated in terms of how that works and how it's managed. But with the basins that they have, obviously they're required to maintain their integrity. And then there is some, my understanding is some management of the water levels within that. So our staff were responsive on Friday. They've been monitoring over the course of about the 30 mil of rain we had last week. And they're back out again yesterday. And then today looking at the work that's been patched up. So while there isn't a magic number or a limit in terms of spill, there is an ongoing monitoring process, if you will, and follow up and engagement with the developers to make sure that these sorts of matters are attended to.
So, but just back through the chair on that. So then that brings me to the next part of that, which is the road surface. And Megan's probably not aware of the state of the road, but I know Richard is because we discussed that on Friday, and the state that it's in. And I actually came along that way tonight to come to the meeting, and it's got much worse from the water that's now run across. So you've got a fair divot in the road, and if you hit that at speed, which you can along that road, it could cause some injuries. So I suppose my question now is going to be directed to Megan, and she may not be able to answer this yet because she hasn't been involved in the initial discussions, but we need to look at that road and have it graded, or yeah, it's quite bad. And look, Richard's seen that on Friday especially, and it's got a lot worse now in the last few days. So that's my next part of the question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Allison. Any further questions? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Megan.
Through the chair, I am aware that there were some issues, and I have asked what our team will be doing, and we will be when the development services team let us know that the developer's done their bit. We were then going to come back and do some more work on Torts Road. So I do believe Jason's got his guys schooled up ready for that.
Thank you. That I'm still continuing on because it's a bit of a lengthy part of the question. So from there, then, all the water that's gone across Torts Road into the property that Robin and Krieg have, that's now flooded into their crop, which has then gone to the train line, headed along, and then gone down Redbanks Road. And it's, instead of going down Clancy like it did last year, it's now flooded out into Jason McDonald's crop there, quite a fair way in. Now he's away, but he is aware of it, and some feedback that's come through the Krieg family, because they've asked me what is going to be done about that water flow into their crops. And if you can imagine, it's a fair chunk of crop that's been damaged and they've just been planted. I'm just hoping that something's going to be rectified with that water in that instance. Just in case, well, I'm going to put it there that there could be a invoice coming our way for crop that's been damaged.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Allison. Anything further?
Yeah, okay, so that brings me on to College Road. So the same rain has flooded down there, and as you know, I work for the university, and all that water that's come down from the township of Roseworthy's usually floods across in to one of the paddocks there. It's a bit hard to explain. Down the end of College Road, it usually goes under the road, then goes under the road out into the water area there. But this time it's actually flooded down, went over Mudlawira, and then flooded out into one of the crop sections there right by the University Oval. Now, I'm of the understanding that council may have come out there on Friday and had a look at that? No. I've been at a different campus, so I was just told about that and I've viewed that over the last couple of days. But it might be worth, when the guys are out there having a look at Twarts Road, if they could just head down and have a look at that. I'm quite happy to meet them and show them. But that's also a bit of an issue because all those dams now along College Road have all filled. So next lot of rain is going to send all that water once again down. But yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Allison. And it's good if you can get those questions, via email for the put into the agenda as well. It's a good move. People get their head around what they're about. So thank you for that. We move on now to our next section of motions on notice. And we have first one is 14.1, which is the increased funding report from Councillor Peter. And there's a motion there, third of the way down the page. And I'm assuming you will move that motion. Yes. Yep. You're happy to withdraw that for the moment, Councillor? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Peter. I think that was a very good result and very good sort of discussion around those points. They're always going to be tricky, but thanks for your indulgence and your patience. 14.3. Councillor Michael, would you like to move and speak to your motion?
No, I think I can withdraw, or whatever the correct term is, because we've dealt with that back in 11 point whatever.
Yep.
Where we agreed to do a review of the IAM. So great that we achieved that result. So I don't need that motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Michael. That's another good result. And 14.4, the signage at Wasley's. I recommend a motion there. Would you like to move that way?
Yes, I'd like to move that motion. So I've had a request from either the Wasley's community group or people at Wasley's, just in relation to some improvements with signage. I think there's an attachment, isn't there, Carrie, that sets out. I don't think it's overly complicated. So I guess I'm just making a request that we have a look into that and produce a report. Thank you.
Any other comments in relation to this particular matter? I need a seconder, if someone would like to second that. Thanks, Councillor Allison. No further comments or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. We have 14.5 from Councillor Michael, improving their community space and walking facilities at Gawler Belt.
Yeah, thanks.
Recommendation at the top.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. So
Motion at the top.
I'd like to move this motion, speaking to it very briefly. So through engaging with residents in Wasley's, Gawler Belt and Hewitt, we've received a number of responses just in relation to the community projects that councils set aside funds for. There was a recurring theme in some of the feedback I received from Gawler Belt residents just around a desire for some community space and improved pedestrian facilities. I will say that it wasn't something that was universally supported in the feedback. Others wanted to retain the semi-rural character of the area. But that said, if we can prepare a report, have a look into it, make some recommendations, and we can decide what to do.
Thanks very much, Councillor Michael. Would someone like to second this motion? Councillor Allison. Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It's a very good opportunity for us to use this forum to look at some of those requests that come in for the funding that's available. Well done. Next one here is 14.6. Options to improve safety for road users.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. Had a busy Sunday afternoon. So I understand perhaps there's some information that I was missing when I put forward this motion. So I'm not sure whether to move the motion or not, or whether I can invite the CEO maybe to make some comment on my proposed motion. and I can determine whether or not I need it or not, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, councillor Michael. Yeah, I had spoken with councillor Michael before the meeting. Of course, Clancy Road is a council road, but Redbanks Road is a DIT road. So DIT are actually responsible for all the safety, etc. At that location. So while council could prepare a report, it isn't responsible for undertaking any of the works and probably doesn't have a great deal of influence either over what the department does at that location. That said, we could, without moving any motion, we could certainly circulate previous correspondence we've had with the department on that to the elected members to show what we've sort of pitched at the department and equally what their response has been, so elected members can sort of gauge where everything's at.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Richard.
that's a great option because that way having that information too, this could be taken up with Tony Piccolo.
And that information be shared with residents that raise their concerns?
Yep.
Okay, no worries. So on that basis, I'll draw the motion.
Thanks, councillor Michael, and I think lucky last.
Could I just ask a question just further to the Clancy Road? So I haven't put anything in, but probably the same residents had spoken about Parkers Road and Clancy Road. I think we might have talked about that once, about the signage there. It's just a give way and quite often people just go straight over. And there's been a few nasty accidents there. So maybe next council meeting I'll put forward if we could swap that, because I think that's our area, swap that from a give way to a stop sign. I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
It is our road. I won't go into the complexities of simply motioning for stop signs, but that's a whole another ball game. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks, councillor Allison. The next one's 14.7, the condition of intersection of Mullawira Road and Annie Terrace at Lossleys.
Yep. So very briefly, similar. A number of people gave me feedback on this. From memory, it's got to do with vegetation in particular at this intersection that people are concerned about. So if we can maybe have a look at that from a road safety perspective and maybe let us know what can or can't be done.
Do we need a mover and a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Michael's moved that, and someone like to second that?
Yeah.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, that vegetation, they talked about getting rid of that years ago. It's near the railway line, and nobody wants to do anything because the line doesn't belong to us. Yeah, you'll have to have a look at it. It's been up once before.
Thanks. Got a mover and a seconder.
Sorry, I've just got a question about that. I'm just a little bit concerned, a bit confused. Mullawira Road and Annie Terrace, that's the, I guess, the western end of Annie Terrace?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's still associated with the railway corridor, is it? I wouldn't have thought so. It's probably a few hundred metres away.
Yeah.
We'll provide the report.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors. And thanks, Councillor Mr. Disneyland. Councillors, I think we've almost completed. Oh, pardon me, we've got motions without notice. There we are. Do we have any motions without notice? I think that's about it. So, councillors, look, thank you so much for your input tonight. This was always going to be a difficult meeting. And thanks so much to the staff for their indulgence too. But, you know, I was really so pleased about the atmosphere in here tonight was good. That even though we had some tricky things, we had some debate, it was helpful. And we got some really strong outcomes out of it as well. So I think we've got a lot to be pleased about, and I just hope we can keep up the good work in the future. So thanks everybody. And
Mr. Mayor, can I just make a comment? I probably should have said earlier, but you talked about the state budget there somewhere. And they did mention there that they're giving funding to rivers, including the Gawler River. So perhaps Michael will have an interesting meeting where they may actually get something done at the Gawler Flood Management Board and
wow,
get some levies done there.
wouldn't that be good? I think Councillor Ellis has something to add.
I understand that this is June's last meeting. So,
Oh.
yes, it hasn't escaped. No, unless we have a special meeting.
We might throw
Oh, official board meeting. Thanks, June.
I must report also that Councillor Simon had to go home. He does suffer from migraines from time to time, and I noticed tonight he was hanging his head a little bit. He's got a shocker, so he had to go home early. He wasn't just ignoring us. It's not his style.
Mayor Bill through the chair. So could I move a motion that council thank June for all of her service over the years?
Do you think you get a seconder? Wow,
I've got one already.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put the
Thank-
motion. We have a seconder?
I'll certainly second that.
Ah.
It's been great to have June there.
Well, perhaps we can
And
all
she's
second
a lot
that.
better looking than you are, Bill.
That wouldn't be.
Thanks, June, for all your support. It's been great.
Well done,
Excellent.
well done, June.
And you stepped in the breach there in the finance too, which would have been a bit of a uncomfortable session.
Thanks, June. I think we've got it up there.
Mr. Mayor, I just got a text, I got an email from a bloke called Alex Bradley from Seppeltsfield. And he said I was the only one that voted against the motion on the character preservation thing. Now, I think I must have been slow putting my hand up. You mightn't have seen it. I don't know, but
I think they're talking about, it must be the motion you voted against was the one Simon put up. Because that's the only one that called for division, so they wouldn't know.
no, he says.
Unless it's in, maybe called division, so.
Watching.
Yeah. He said, I'm a resident of Lightwood, living in Seppeltsfield. I understand there was a motion this evening regarding the Character Preservation Act, and that Councillor Reichstein was the only councillor from our ward who voted against it. Now, I know I might have been slow putting my hand up. I wasn't asleep, I don't think.
No, I don't think it was division call.
No. This is about, no.
Yeah, I think I'll close the meeting if that's okay, everybody, but still continue your chat, but officially close the meeting.